Atonement for Me, episode 57, When Anxiety Meets Depression. Hey Magical Misfits, it's Kaidain Ivy and welcome back to Atonement for Me. So it's been interesting being 2 years deep into a pandemic. No one really knows how long something like this will last or what kind of a toll it will take on you mentally and emotionally. And I know especially anybody who suffers mental health, this entire uncertainty can definitely be a trigger. And I have talked before about suffering from PTSD, depression, and anxiety. But what that presents itself as and how it kind of forces my brain into little kind of packages kind of can contradict itself when I'm experiencing kind of a mental health break, or I'm super anxious, or I've gotten super stressed, or lack of sleep. That one is a huge one that really, really affects my mental health because for so long, especially dealing with depression, in order to get myself through those kind of dark days, I really had to set a routine for myself. So it was super, super structured. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I set my alarm every day. I would get up at the same time. We'd go for a walk with Vader. I would do this until this time. And I kind of scheduled it the way I would be operating if I was going to work, just making that at home so that you have your 3 hours and then you have your break and you have your set time for lunch, just to make sure that I was doing something. Because the thing with depression is it creeps in slowly, but the lethargy, you don't realize it when you're in it because everything is so slow. You're just tired. And that can be a sign of anything. It can be you overworked yourself. It can be a sign of like mental health creeping up on me. It can be I'm getting a cold. It can be allergies. So it's really hard to pick up on that first kind of trigger while I'm in it. I can always think back and kind of trace my symptoms as my mental health has decayed and then bounced back. And that's kind of how I've been able to set my routines for basic functions sometimes, like setting an alarm on my phone, being like, remember to eat. Pretty much just treating myself like a Tamagotchi until my body and mind were ready to do it for me. So keeping myself busy was really important to making sure that I didn't get really, really down on myself. But on the other side, anxiety is kind of the opposite of depression. Depression is there's nothing. You feel a numbness. You just kind of exist. Whereas anxiety, you're in hyper alert, and everything seems to be imminent and need to get this done now. And so if you have a mental space where you're just checked out and you're just super tired, but the other half of your brain is, oh my God, we need to get this done. We need to do this. We need to do this. And sometimes my anxiety amplifies as I get more depressed, because I'll kind of see myself slip into a depression. And so I try to hyper mode myself out of that by trying to constantly do things or clean things or routine things. And then that feeds into my anxiety because I've got so much going on all the time. And then it'll be a kind of a fluctuate. It's not like a manic, like super emotional roller coaster. It's kind of having guilt and doubt, because that's your depression kind of settling in. And then kind of giving that steroids, because that's your anxiety kicking in. So if I have a day where I don't really accomplish anything, I've been kind of sluggish, I know mentally that that is probably a good thing for me. And I know physically that's probably a good thing for me because I'm constantly doing things. But then I'll feel super bad about not doing anything, and then worrying if I'm possibly getting depressed, and then hyper checking in on myself, and then worrying about, is that just something in my head? Because that also goes with PTSD, is memory loss. And it's also goes with depression. And so if you can't always remember something, and then your brain is on a kind of compulsive loop of, no, you should know this, you should know this, you really should, then the anxiety kind of kicks in. Is just like, okay, remember, but you can't. It's like fighting fire and water, like all the time. And I find that especially when I'm in a place of uncertainty. So, for example, the pandemic, I don't always know when I'm going to get to work, or if things are going to be open, and all of the concerns, stresses that kind of go with that. That measure of uncertainty kind of teases at my anxiety. It's just like, look, here's something that you can potentially worry to death about because everybody is. I feel like so many people are in that same boat, and especially when you take away a lot of your emotional or mental or even physical connections when people are being isolated, it makes it really easy for us to kind of be stuck in our own heads and kind of stew in that. So some days are better than others. It's kind of just like the weather. Sometimes there's going to be a lot of storms, and there's really nothing you can do about it. You just kind of gotta ride through those storms. You can prep all you like, but sometimes you're just not prepared for the way that storm is going to hit you. Some things make it easier to weather the storm, but that storm is still going to rage through, like it or not. So, in a time where I feel like a lot of people are in that same swimming pool of anxiety and depression, and you may or may not be comfortable with those feelings because they are newer, being brought on by the pandemic, or just being able to examine yourself closer, being in isolation. It's not a comfortable feeling ever, but it's not unnormal. We're living in very unnormal times, so it's okay to have those thoughts where you're freaking out, because change and the uncertainty and the unknown scares a lot of people, especially people who kind of use those things like routine or stability, and cling onto those as kind of their pillars to keep them upright when they're not necessarily strong enough to stand on their own 2 feet. It makes it seem like the current is a lot more vast than it should be. And it's okay, because it's not a permanent thing. And that's just the tea.